All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon for some of you. I think it's still good morning for others. We are excited to have over 40 of you participating in this webinar today, and really want to give you some great information that you can use immediately, really, but also as you plan for advocacy and legislative days, government relations within your area. My name is Bartley Sides. I am the co-chair for the Government Relations Committee within SACAC, and kind of got into this role from helping to plan South Carolina's legislative days for the past several years. Fortunately, you will not have to listen to me talk for most of today. We have three very distinguished panelists who are going to share some of their experiences and information with you today. We have Mike Rose, who's Director of Government Relations with NACAC. He's going to talk about kind of the national landscape of advocacy and government relations. We also have Tricia Davis, who's Director of College Counseling at Episcopal Collegiate School in Arkansas, and she's also State Chair for their government relations. Is going to talk about what she's done on a state level. And then finally, we also have David Dixon, who is Senior Policy Advisor at EducationCounsel, and is going to talk about what are some of the do's and don'ts and how do you apply what we have talked about today. As you have questions, please use the question button. We will answer questions at the end. And so we hope that you will have questions, because we'll dedicate a good amount of time at the end to that. So to get started, we are going to turn to Mike. And Mike, my first question for you is just to give us kind of an overview of what are some of the things that are happening on a national level with advocacy and government relations, including an overview of Day on the Hill, attendance, just what are some of the things happening on a national level?
Sure. So thanks for inviting me, and thanks for the question. Just by way of background, again, Michael Rose, Director of Government Relations for NACAC. I've been in this role a little over 5 years and spent roughly 8 years as a congressional staffer, and then another 5 years as a lobbyist in a different firm. So for better or worse, I've been around DC for a long time. But nationally, it's actually relatively quiet for education issues right now. The most maybe critical thing or most recent thing that's happened is that the president signed into law a spending bill the other week, which includes year-round Pell for college students, and it also includes funding for the new elementary and secondary school Education Act. And unfortunately, that program is underfunded from where we would like to see it. The program is authorized, which means that Congress is allowed to spend up to $1.6 billion on this program, the SEA bill. But unfortunately, Congress only passed $400 million for all the programs that we care about in this education bill. So we have our work cut out for us over the next couple months for the new spending bill to get that funding level up a little bit higher. We're also monitoring any potential changes to the DACA program and any potential changes then to immigration law. But as I said, it's relatively quiet right now in DC on education issues that we're focusing on. From a NACAC point of view, once a year, usually in the early part of March, we host an advocacy day where NACAC members, and actually some that are not necessarily NACAC members but are active in the affiliate, will come to Washington, D.C. for a couple days, one day usually on Sunday, to learn about some of the issues that Congress is debating or the Trump administration is working on. And we have some other speakers come in and talk about relevant issues. And then on Monday, everyone heads to the Hill and meets with their members of Congress. And over the last 2 years, we've seen significant growth. We had about 150 people attend this year. We had about 125 last year. And I think given that Congress is in Republican hands and the Trump administration is now in office, we have our work cut out for us, and we really need to do a lot more advocacy work to make sure that the issues that we care about are protected and maintained. They are generally not too looked too favorably upon our issues, so we have to really play a lot of defense to make sure that the programs that we care about are not harmed too badly. So maybe I'll pause there and see if any other questions you might have, Bartley.
Sure. Yes. So just do you mind expanding a little bit about what are some of the stances that NACAC takes, and how do those transfer both on the national level, but then also as folks are trying to learn about these issues, what do you encourage them to do?
Sure. So NACAC's advocacy work started really around three pillars. It's sometimes referred to as a three-legged stool: access to quality counseling, rigorous curriculum, and then need-based financial aid. Obviously, we want to make sure that high school students have access to counseling so that they take appropriate courses, and then also making informed decisions about where to go to college. We want to make sure that they can afford to go to college, so that's why we talk about need-based financial aid. And then lastly, the rigorous curriculum, we want to make sure that students are ready to succeed in college or life after high school if they decide not to go to an institution. So those three things are really at the core for us. However, over the last few years, we've added to our advocacy work. We have what we call the Student Protection Agenda, which is aimed at protecting students and taxpayers from unscrupulous colleges. We also last year added international initiatives, which is designed to help students study in countries other than where they grew up. It's not just U.S. students going abroad, but it's also foreign students coming to the United States. So we want to make sure that the admissions process and the recruiting process in that for those students is just as rigorous as it is for U.S. students looking at U.S. institutions. And then lastly, I shouldn't say lastly, but we also have DACA and DREAM Act, which for students that came to the United States as young individuals by their parents and have lived here for a long time. We want to give them legal status. We also are concerned about other non-traditional students like LGBT students, making sure that they have a safe environment to work and study in. And then we have a couple other smaller items that we work on, but not necessarily as high priority as the issues that I just outlined from there.
Can you tell us, so we have a number of different affiliates represented on this webinar today. Can you tell us, do affiliates take a stance? And if they do take a stance, does it have to align with the stance that NACAC has taken?
It does not. Affiliates are independent entities, and they can decide if they want to take a position on a particular issue. We generally recommend that it falls sort of at least tangentially into the issue that I just mentioned. But if an affiliate feels that it's important, they're welcome to take another position. A lot of times they'll look to NACAC for guidance and kind of help think through things through as they're considering stuff. But largely, most of the time they've taken positions that are similar to NACAC and kind of coupled it with what we recommend and have taken positions on.
Mike, do you mind, tell us about some of the resources that NACAC offers in terms of helping individuals figure out, there are a lot of issues and those issues are always changing. So what is the best way to stay on top of what is happening, the most current information, and how can we as individuals stay on top of advocating?
Sure. So I'm going to pull up NACAC's webpage, hopefully, and point you there. So as you may know, NACAC recently updated and modified our website, and this is the new website here. And if you are interested in learning more about some of our advocacy work, I would go down to the bottom and you click on legislative, and that will open up a new page where we we maintain our advocacy work. So how to stay informed, a couple different recommendations. One is you can subscribe to a mailing list, which we send out periodic updates about what's going on both on the national level as well as the state level. You can also send me an email, and I will add you to a listserv that I maintain that pushes out information both, again, on the national level as well as the affiliate level. But if you're just more curious about what we've done maybe in the last couple of weeks or last couple of months, or if you want to go meet with your legislator, this website should have the information that you need to do so. Probably the best place to start is under resources, and that has our fact sheets that we usually use in our meetings. You can just click on one of these, kind of read through it, print it out if you want to, and bring it with you to the meeting so you don't forget about what you're talking about. But this is really kind of the go-to area for our advocacy work. And then if you're interested in what kind of work we've done, you can click on advocacy work. We list all the letters that we send to either elected officials, Congress, or the administration. For example, we sent a letter to Secretary DeVos about a loan repayment program. And then we sent a letter to Congress about adequately funding the Department of Education. So you can kind of see what goes on right there and get informed about some of the issues that we're working on.
Perfect. Do you mind telling us, as we talk about issues and advocating for students and access to quality education, how do you sometimes separate out the personal from the professional, and working to make sure that we're working on a student's behalf, and that can go from whether it be political beliefs or also really not even feeling like you know enough to even talk to an elected official. How do you really work to kind of separate those two aspects of your life?
Sure. Well, I guess in a way I'm fortunate that where we work on issues that I care about and I support. So that makes it a little bit easier going into a meeting and saying, we really need to push for adequate funding for Department of Education, or we need strong legislation to protect LGBT students, those kind of things. But really, I think if you're uncomfortable talking about certain things, or if you're from a school that may have a different opinion on some of the work that we do, talk about some of the other issues that that we're advocating on. If you don't feel comfortable talking or describing what rigorous curriculum is, talk about why counseling is important or why financial aid is important, and then you can sort of leave off the other aspects. And one important distinction I think we all need to keep in mind is that you're representing SACAC or your affiliate, or you're representing NACAC. You're not representing your institution. So you can introduce yourself as an employee of X university, but you want to really stress that you're here as an individual representing SACAC or whatever the affiliate may be. But rectifying, not necessarily supporting one issue over another, maybe just don't talk or don't spend much time on that issue, or leave it to someone else that may be in the group with you to talk about. And then, I strongly recommend reading a member of Congress's or a state legislator's biography to understand what they believe in and support and what they're working on, where they went to school too. There might be an automatic connection that you can draw with that individual. So becoming more familiar with who you're going to be meeting with, but also the issues that we work on is really key to a successful meeting. And to be honest, I've walked into some meetings that I knew were not going to be receptive. The staff is not going to be receptive. But you have to talk to your friends as well as those that don't agree with you, and at least put it out there. Check that box that we met with that individual, and if they vote a certain way and it harms the students, well, at least we can say that we told that person that what the consequences were going to be. I think maybe one last thing to keep in mind is you don't need to know everything. You have me, you have the government relations committee chairs to be a resource. So if one of the staffers asks you a question and you don't know the answer to it, just say, I'm not sure, let me get back to you. And we'll help you craft an answer to follow up with.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I think that from my experience, one thing that I would certainly echo is that I certainly don't know everyone, and I think that, or I don't know everything, and I think that there's so much to know, it's impossible to know everything. So I've certainly found NACAC as a great resource, and encourage you guys to go to the resources page, sign up for some of the email alerts, and if you don't know the answer to something, simply ask, because it's impossible to know everything that's happening.
And maybe one last thought is, yeah, if you do send me an email and want to sign up, we do not spam you. We're very judicial about maybe a couple times a month sending you a note. So don't be worried about your inbox getting overwhelmed.
All right. Thanks so much, Mike. If you have questions for Mike, we will again answer those at the end. But at this point, we are going to transition to Tricia Davis. Tricia is one of the state chairs for the state of Arkansas and has worked to plan their state legislative days. And so we're going to kind of bring it down to the state level. And some states have very active legislative days. Within the state of South Carolina, I always joke that I'm constantly trying to copy Arkansas or Georgia. They have such fantastic programming. And so we will hear about some of the great things that Tricia has done within the state of Arkansas. So turning to Tricia. Tricia, will you just kind of open up by giving us an overview of how you got involved in this work and what do legislative days look like in the state of Arkansas?
As far as how I got into this work, other than just an interest in politics in general, there was a call to everyone in the NACAC in the states that they wanted to have a legislative action day in every state. Brett Carr, who was our representative at Hendricks at the time, reached out to me and said, I know you love this, you have an interest. There's only like 2 of us in Arkansas in SACAC anyway, so it's you and me. We're doing this. And we did. We started that 3 years ago and actually had 14 people registered to do the first legislative action day. There's only 17 people, honestly, in Arkansas that are SACAC members. And we got snowed out twice. And so Brett and I went by ourselves to meet with a couple of key committee members on the Education Committee and Finance Committee, and also to meet with the governor's education liaison that year, and just start the conversation and started the ball rolling. And it grew from there. The next year we had 17 people and we actually held it, and everyone attended and met with their individual legislators, and then again met with the education committees chairs and met with the education representative for the governor's office. And it was successful. And then this year we steamrolled into 32 participants and it got huge, and lots of good education occurs. To give you a sense of a sample agenda, let's see if I can share this with you. Our legislative action day, is that pulling up for everyone? Our agenda, can you see that one?
Yes, okay. I can see that.
So this was this year's agenda. Because in the state of Arkansas, you can pretty much get to Little Rock within 2.5 hours. We were able to start at 10. Most people could drive in that morning. In certain states, they're going to need to come in the night before and spend the night. Or in states like Florida, where it's hard to get people from South Florida up to Tallahassee, they sometimes are starting to do multiple legislative days with local legislators in their cities. But for states like ours, where everyone can come to the Capitol, we try to meet at an office near the Capitol. So we were actually using the Arkansas State System office, which is right across the street, beautiful office. They hosted that for us. After we did welcomes, we went into education for our participants. So every year we've had close relationships with the director of the Arkansas Department of Higher Ed, which is one of the keys to making this successful. And I would urge any state to make sure they have the director of Department of Higher Ed always come speak. So Dr. Markham spoke with our group this year, and that was one of the selling points for participants. Arkansas is about to go into a new system of funding colleges based on like outcome-based funding, which I think is sort of becoming the trend. So all of the colleges were very curious on this. She basically unveiled it to our participants and had unveiled it to legislators the day before. So it was great timing on our part. So she was able to speak on the outcome-based funding, lots of questions around that and how that would work and how that would impact admissions in some ways, especially because transfer students play a real role in the funding model. And so that was really helpful on our parts, because then when we met with legislators later that day, they wanted to know our opinions on what do we think of this outcome-based funding? Is this good? Is this a good model or not? They hadn't voted on it yet. It ended up passing. After that, Mike Rose from NACAC, who everyone just heard from, Skyped with us and gave us great information on how do you approach a legislator? What do you say? How do you do this? What are the key points that NACAC wants to make? What does NACAC stand for? And then how can we take that from a national level onto a state level and make it personal to our state? And then we followed that up with Shane Broadway, who's the government relations liaison for the Arkansas state system. And this is another thing that I would advise anyone running their state days to try to get the government relations liaisons for your major universities involved. So as it turned out, Shane Broadway was actually the director of the Arkansas Department of Higher Ed when we started this, and he became a dear friend to us in this process. So he actually set up a lot of our appointments for us, set up our conference room for us in the Capitol. He knew the players well. He prepped us really well. And when you meet with this legislator, you need to know these are going to be his issues. This is going to be tricky for him to help you in this way, or this is going to help you when you meet with her. She's going to be an advocate for you, but make sure you're using this language. So that was very helpful for us. We learned from the year before when we tried to push for certain legislation that some of the government relations liaisons were not going to be able to help, and we're not going to be able to help push that for various reasons. It got political, which is what it does. And so we needed to make sure they were on board beforehand. But then in the afternoon, we did something a little different from previous years. Instead of all of the participants meeting with their individual legislators, we went as a group and met with key legislators. So Joyce Elliott, who's the first one that you see at 12:30, was a former school teacher and worked for College Board. She's a huge advocate for education. She's on the education committee. Very important for us to start there. It was like our gentle start because we knew she would be on board with everything that we were advocating. Bruce Cozart is the chair of one of the other education committees. We met with Chris Ritchie, who oversees the lottery committee. This was very key for us because one of the things we were advocating is we did not want the lottery scholarship to only be test score based. So right now in Arkansas, you need a 19 on the ACT. We feel like that really is unfair for students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, for our minority students in the state. And so there's a big push to have a GPA component. So we wanted to meet with the chair of the Lottery Scholarship Committee. We also met with members of the governor's office who deal with education, and we ended with the legislator who actually wanted to meet with us, who's trying to pass some legislation on sexual assault prevention on college campuses, workshops that need to be held on college campuses, and he's very clued into financial aid on college campuses. So it ended up being a really good day meeting as a group.
Perfect. Can you tell us a little bit about if someone sees this agenda and thinks, wow, this is a really amazing opportunity, how can they get plugged into a legislative day within their state?
One of the first things I would say is to look on your ACAC's website. When we look, and I'm trying to pull up ours now, let's see if I can. Like when we pull up the SACAC legislative page, we can, well, this is giving me webinars, but hold on, we will get there. When we go under legislative days, you can see what's coming. Everyone can see the Arkansas Legislative Day right at the top. Look, there's Joyce Elliott we met with. That's our 32 people strong group. But you can scroll down and see upcoming events. For those of you on the webinar right now from North Carolina, there is an event coming up May 23rd. Certainly sign up for it if you're in North Carolina. Also, I would say go to the usually on every ACA's website, there's a volunteer link. Here it is on the SACAC website. I would say volunteer and let them know you're interested in doing that. Find out who's the chair in that state and tell them you're interested, because they want, I would say most chairs are wanting more help. Who else can we involve? Because the more voices, the better.
Okay, perfect. And Tricia, another question that I'm most likely going to ask all of our panelists this, but in your experience, if someone's not a political expert, I know you said you had an interest in political science and politics, but if someone doesn't have that background but is still interested in advocacy and in working on behalf of students on some of these issues, what do they need to know going in? Do they need to know a lot or do a lot of research going into it? What are your suggestions?
I think the people that want to be involved are the ones that care about their students and are aware that things at the state and the national level are very much playing into the financial aid that their students are receiving, the access they have to counselors. And if they want to see that change, it's wonderful to get involved. They don't have to have a huge background in what's going on within the state or nationally. I think that's where NACAC does a great job in prepping everyone when you go to the National Legislative Day. And at the state level, we try ahead of time, at least in Arkansas, and we model what South Carolina is doing and what Georgia's doing and Louisiana, of trying to prepare the participants, giving them a little bit of reading material ahead of time and giving them handouts. And that's why we spend our morning educating all the participants on these are the issues going on in the state right now. Here's how you might talk about it. And we've also learned not to send people alone or even in pairs. Bigger groups are better because the questions start to feed off of each other and it becomes a more natural conversation and not me sitting in front of my legislator going, what do I say? How do I tell you I want more funding? One of the things that we have sent out, we did this last year to try to educate our, oops, hold on, that's not it. Let's see if I can find the document. Here we go. If everyone can see this, this is what, not only did we give our legislators last year, but we also sent participants ahead of time. Again, we were advocating heavily on we want a GPA component in our lottery scholarship. And ACT was a huge help for us. And they actually wrote a letter saying we do not want the ACT score to be the sole criteria for receiving a scholarship. So they gave us all of this great information broken down by race, broken down by Pell Grant recipients on ACT scores versus GPA reported through ACT. And the Department of Higher Ed actually helped us with some of this information because they too wanted to see that changed. So we gave participants all of this information and then we were able to pass it on to legislators with policy recommendations involved as well within the issues we were talking about. And then Mike Rose sent us ahead of time quite a bit of information on number of counselors per student in each state, the other issues going on in NACAC, sort of talking points in that way. So I felt like even our participants who may be a little bit more introverted, who are not as politically minded, were ready to go. And we also talked about tell your stories, tell your students' stories. You know, when students aren't receiving financial aid packages in Arkansas until July before they start college, what's the impact on your students? How can we, that was another issue in Arkansas, how can we get financial aid packages earlier? Tell those stories, and it left a big impact on our legislators. So when Brett Carr and I went 3 years ago and had these conversations around these issues, we then met with a whole different group of legislators last year. And one of, I guess you could say, the victories for us, because no legislation has changed it, but one of the victories this year when we went back, met with totally different legislators, is they were bringing up these issues to us. So they were bringing up the issue of, how do you feel about the fact that no GPA components in the lottery scholarship? We're thinking about changing that. Would you be an advocate for that? What do you think it needs to be? How do you feel about financial aid packages coming out so late? What can we do to change that? How do you see that helping students? So they were talking about things we had addressed with other legislators the year before, which made us realize they were talking amongst themselves, and that was a victory.
Perfect. One last question for you. So I think legislative days are an amazing way to get plugged in and really have some sort of action item. But what does someone do if they are not able to make it to a legislative day? How else can they stay involved?
Yes, I think anytime an alert goes out, and NACAC recently just did an action alert out, write to your legislators about those. Follow up with the chairs who hosted a legislative action day and say, what were the issues you talked about? Do you have a letter, a sample letter that I can use to send to my local legislators as well to continue to push this. So there's other ways you can do it through emails and mailings to your legislators and just staying plugged in and reading what's going on.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Tricia. Again, for those of you who have questions specifically about state legislative days or for Tricia, we will answer those at the end. I see that we already have one great question that's come in, so we will answer that at the end. But for now, we're going to turn to David Dixon. David Dixon, again, is Senior Policy Advisor, Education Counsel in Nelson Mullins Riley and Scarborough's Washington office, which is where he is today, and is going to tell us a little bit about, based on what we've heard, how do we take this and apply it, and really what is the best way to advocate. So thanks, David, so much. Can you tell us a little bit about your government relations experience? And you've worked in admissions and lived in Georgia before. So tell us how did you really get involved in this?
Sure. Well, I'll start off by saying that this can be sort of a cautionary tale. I started off by attending a legislative day many moons ago, just to, honestly, as a way to get out of the office and be with some colleagues, and thought it was going to be interesting. And it can be addictive, and I kind of feel like NACAC was sort of my pusher. It led to me being here, sitting directly across the street from the Capitol. But I got involved while serving as an admission counselor at Oglethorpe University. Attended for the first time, and honestly was very nervous about showing up. I felt like I was completely unprepared. My undergraduate degrees were in business and psychology, and never really had an interest in the political side of it. And I walked out feeling empowered on the other side. I returned the following year and actually helped plan the legislative day. After that, ended up rolling on to chairing the state of Georgia for government relations. And by that point, I was fully hooked and decided to take it even further, and went back to law school at Georgia State University while serving as assistant director of admission at Oglethorpe. And just recently transitioned here to EducationCounsel, where I kind of get the gift of being able to help drive education policy, both at the institutional level within schools, admission offices, all the way up through state and federal level as well. But it's been an exciting journey, but one that with every step that you take, every time you come back to it, it just gets better and better. So yeah, that's a bit of my tale of experience with government relations and what led me to this point.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. So one thing that I have heard is that advocacy is really just like storytelling. So can you give us an example of how do you make we hear advocacy and legislation and government relations, and all of that sounds kind of these big ideas and concepts. So how do you use personal stories to kind of get your point across?
Well, I feel like whether you're sitting on the college side of the desk or the high school side of the desk, we spend much of our days with the students directly in front of us, and we know how the laws around us are impacting them. I know for me, I love to come to the table. Actually, the bulk of what I would talk about with our legislators was the actual stories of how my students were being affected. One of them was a father and son combo who were both veterans that came to my table to go back to school, and a part of my time there I work with adult students. And they had gone through almost all of their military funding, attended an institution that was a bit unscrupulous in their practices, and were nearing the end of their funding without a degree. They were looking to transfer to our school, and I had to sit there and have the conversation with them about that I could not accept their credits. They were, I want to say, in the ballpark of 90 credits in, had served our country, put their lives on the line, and they were being blockaded from being able to achieve finishing out their education. And those are the kind of stories that to me hit home to the heart. And if it's something that is close to you, that you've experienced it, being able to relay that message to the member, to the legislator, and saying that, hey, the decisions you're making at your level are having this impact on the ground. it's kind of heartbreaking to have to do that. But that is actually even one of the challenges that I deal with now is trying to make sure that the decisions made at a mile high are staying relevant and connected to what's happening at the level. And we're the ones, you sitting there as a college counselor or as an admissions officer, are the ones that hear it every day. And that is probably the biggest gem that you can give them, is letting them know exactly what the impact is.
So what tips do you have for folks who are looking to set up a meeting or send an email or write a letter? How should they even start these stories or start these conversations?
I would say that a great way to start them is by thanking them. I mean, honestly, regardless of if they are someone who has been in support of legislation that we stand behind as an organization, that NACAC is supporting, or that she was an individual personally believe in, start off by thanking them for their work. I think in my personal life at large, I believe that gratitude in itself goes a long ways. It makes a difference. It sets the tone and changes it from one of being adversarial, if they happen to be on the other side of the coin from you, or to making it more of a teamwork effort. But especially if they are legislators who have already supported efforts that you are behind, or even do a little bit of research if you can. A lot of times, NACAC does an awesome job of sort of giving you the information to be armed when you're walking in. Perhaps there's some legislation on the table that the person you're meeting with actually sponsored. They supported that bill, so you definitely want to thank them from that side. If they disagree with you, you don't want to completely dismiss them. You want to try to at least find a point of agreement and saying, hey, I understand what you're trying to achieve by that, or I understand that you're coming from the right place, that you're seeking to provide better educational opportunities for our students. However, this is the impact it's having. But if you can try to, again, tie in and make it a point of touch instead of a point of contention, I think you can have a better conversation that way. I would say that it is a-okay, actually not just okay, it is encouraged to be firm and be passionate. Speak from the heart and let your truth be heard. Know that you are the ones that are the experts. And that is the biggest piece that you can bring to the table. Also, if you are speaking to specific legislation, be sure to use the bill number if you can. And again, that's not something that you have to be hold a Juris Doctorate degree or have studied policy. You'll be armed by that from our great friends and resources like Mike Rose and David Hawkins and NACAC that will give that to you. But being armed with it, nothing else, at least the title of the bill, so that you know how to reference it. I'd say maybe somewhat similar than what I'm doing in this part right now, be brief. Their time is precious. Also understand that sometimes you may be speaking directly with the legislator. Sometimes it may be a staff person in their office, which actually more happens at the federal level, but that their time is very precious. There's been moments where I was waiting for our meeting and the legislator was walking down the hallway having a walking meeting. Like they literally have meetings in between meetings while it's happening. So the more that you can be concise and get to the point for them, it makes their day a little bit easier. On the other side of that, sometimes they will engage you beyond it. If they want to keep the conversation going, then you roll with it. That's more time that we're getting FaceTime and them to know who we are. I can actually think of 2 years in a row in Georgia that one of our teammates ended up being left behind on the bus because her representative held her for close to an hour having the conversations, and some of us stayed behind to go back and pick her up with the car. But it was awesome that she had that type of experience and he was that interested in hearing about what she had to say about what they were doing under the Gold Dome in Georgia was impacting our students. I would say, I think I got maybe one more minute or so in there, but as you're reaching out to set the appointments, for those of you that would be doing the coordinating of it, make sure that you're reaching out to both sides of the aisle. It's not just about those that you feel are aligned with your beliefs. It's about having a bipartisan conversation, and also being aware of maybe what committee do they serve on. The person from your district might actually sit on the House Higher Education Committee. And being aware of that, you know that you're going to have a different conversation because they're more readily informed about the issues versus somebody in a different committee, you might be bringing them up to speed. So being armed with that can help as well.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. I think it's, one thing that you said is really important is once sometimes legislators know who they're talking to, then they do want to talk to you for a long time, because I think that they oftentimes do see us as experts in education, and because whether we feel like we're an expert or not, we live and work and breathe this job every single day. And so I think that when they realize that you are a volunteer as opposed to someone paid to do this, that really carries a lot of weight. All right, thank you so much, David. We are now going to switch over to Aaron McCubbin, who is going to help facilitate some of the Q&As, and the three panelists, as well as myself, we're going to be here to answer those questions that you may have. So again, at the bottom, there's a Q&A button. As you have questions, please just type those, and Aaron will kind of facilitate the final portion of the webinar.
Thanks, Bartley. So one of the things that I got just from participating and getting to listen in this webinar, which was such a treat, thank you to you all, is the power of storytelling. And when you really have that opportunity to connect or to share about something that you're experiencing in your day-to-day, that can be incredibly powerful. Like, that is the heart of advocacy. So I'm wondering, Tricia, from your experience with the legislative day, things like that, what's a great story that you heard, and why was it compelling? And what impact did you see it have?
One of the strongest stories that I've heard in the last 3 years actually came from Alice Haney, who's at Bentonville High School up in Northwest Arkansas. That happens to be the high school where our governor's grandson attends. And so when we were meeting with his education liaison last year, and we were talking about the counselor to student ratio in the state of Arkansas, and the education liaison was saying, oh, it's fine, we're great in Arkansas compared to, say, California, we should be proud. Alice was able to say, actually, I'm the only college counselor in the school. I work with over 400 students. I can never write a recommendation letter that's personal. And then was able to, granted, it's not fair to compare always to private schools, but was able to look at me and say, she's got 52 kids. She's going to know every detail and can write in detail. I will never do that. I can't write a recommendation letter for the governor's grandson when he goes to college next year. I will never know him. I can do large classroom presentations, and that's all. You can't even have an appointment with me. And you could see, and this was such a poised person, the education liaison, just mouth wide open going, oh. So then how do we get that? How do we help students? Why do they always have to go out to community organizations or sort of rely on parents? If their parents are educated, why can't we use the educated counselors in the schools? Oh, there aren't enough of them. So that was one of the more powerful personal anecdotes in that. And actually, since then, this year when we met with legislators, that kept coming up over and over again about we want more counselors in schools, and we want them to be educated through the master's programs to be able to talk about college counseling as well. So we're looking to see some legislation in the next couple of years that should help that.
That's a great example. Thank you for sharing. This next question came from one of our participants. And Mike, I think this might be a great one for you, but feel free for anybody to jump in. This person's a regional recruiter, and so they have a home state, but they also have the other states that they travel to. Can you attend legislative days in other regions? How do you get involved in the national level? And where is the best place to get started?
Sure. So the first part of that, you can, yes, you can do both of them. I would just recommend whichever one you feel more comfortable with. Feel free to go to both of them, one of them or the other. Elected officials want to speak to their constituents. So it might be slightly better to go to, if the person's in Virginia, they might want to go to Richmond because they vote in Virginia and that kind of stuff. But they're also representing the university, or they're representing students in their home state, so it may make sense to go there. So it's really up to the individual's time and ability to go. I think, on the federal level, I think there's a lot of intimidation. You're Washington, D.C., you got to travel up here. It might be a little bit overwhelming, but we really work hard to prep you on Sunday for the Hill meetings, and a lot of people come up to me afterwards and say, I was scared out of my mind. but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm glad I came. But if you want to, maybe start on the state or local level, that's totally fine as well. Sometimes people want to get a couple of practice swings in before they come up to DC, and go from there. It's really up to the individual and their timing and availability.
Great.
I'll just add in a quick bit that I think the person that asked the question was a regional in Atlanta, and one thing that might make it easier is that at Atlanta we usually do have groups that are sent to the meetings. So there's at least one person who is a constituent of the person they're speaking with in that, and the rest of it is sort of support from the rest of the SACAC crew that's there. So it might be, from a logistics standpoint, if it's easier for you since you're in town to go to Georgia's Legislative Day, it might be an easy segue because you'll more than likely be on a team with at least 2, if not 4 other people there with you, and then maybe carry that experience with you back to your home state.
And I certainly support what David just said. We don't send anyone in DC. We don't send anyone out on their own. I'm always available, or staff here is available to join you on meetings. Similarly, there's usually someone from the affiliate or from your state in attendance as well, so you can join them. So we're not going to send you into the deep end and wish you the best. We're going to try and make sure that you're successful.
Great. If there are any other questions from folks watching, go ahead and type them in at this time. I'm going to ask a question that I've been dying to ask in the meantime, and we'll see if any other ones come in. But this is for anyone who would be interested in answering the emails that we get from our regional legislative chairs and the gov relations chairs, and the ones that we get from NACAC nationally are packed full of resources and links. And they're the emails that I have to bookmark and go back to because I want to make sure that I have time to read through them. So I'm curious if you could kind of just give us a little bit of a snapshot of what kind of information is in those emails, where are the important places to prioritize, and sort of what's the purpose behind the different things that are included, and how might we integrate that more into our day-to-day?
Sure, that's something that I can kind of touch on. I think that there's so much information that comes in through those emails that it is hard to process it all. But what I would encourage folks to do is really focus on the areas in which you're interested in. You may not you may feel really versed and really knowledgeable about a certain area. And so that's okay for that to be something that you speak on and that you feel very passionately about. And so I think that taking those articles and those emails and incorporating them into how you get your daily news. I mean, what other articles are you reading independently? What are you watching on television or reading online? And just kind of incorporating those emails in with your news and with your own personal stories. I mean, we've talked about storytelling, and I think that for all of us, it's important to pay attention to what other people are also encountering. I think that none of us, or very few of us, probably encounter everything, and so I think that as you can, following message boards or attending conferences or just talking to a counselor who works at a different school within your city is really important to help you process that information, because I think that just reading something and clicking on links to an email can be overwhelming, and so weaving that into just kind of your daily information and news is important.
And as the author of some of those emails, I recognize that they can be incredibly dense. So I do work hard to make sure that it's really more of the critical information that you need and not necessarily the extra information, but I also try and group it so it's easy to catch your eye and figure out if it's something that's relevant to you or the work that you're working on, or maybe, as Bartley just mentioned, maybe secondary. There is a lot of information, but we do try and prioritize and make sure that you're in the loop as best we can, rather than just giving you even more information that may not be as relevant.
Yeah, those emails are great. I love the subheadings because it allows me, like Bartley suggested, to kind of go directly to the things that I feel like I want to know the most about at that moment. And then it's easy to sort and to go back as well. Well, I want to thank you all for your time today. Like I said, it was such a treasure to be able to be a participant of a webinar and to be able to absorb that information. But I know, Bartley, do you want to wrap us up?
Yes, just want to say thank you all so much for participating today. As you have questions, please feel free to contact us. I have one final screen that I am going to bring up, just so if you have questions, you can certainly contact us. These are the folks who are on the panel today. If you are uncertain about who your state chair is and you are in SACAC, feel free to email either Pam or you can email me. If you are not within SACAC and wondering who your state chair is, you can reach out to Mike Rose and he will get you in touch with the correct people. So again, thank you all so much. We really appreciate it and look forward to hearing what great things start happening in your state.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.